When you're not feeling quite right and things don't seem to be working well with your body, it can be easy to panic, especially when you're not sure if you or a loved one is having a heart attack.
But emergency room physicians say sometimes what looks like an emergency may not really be one.
So how can you tell the difference if it's heartburn or something more serious like a heart attack? News 6 morning anchor and health reporter Kirsten O'Connor standing by to ask a doctor.
Well, it can definitely be scary if you think you're having a heart attack, and sometimes symptoms of something like heartburn can feel very similar to those of a heart attack. So Dr. Latha Ganti from the emergency department at Osceola Regional Medical Center is here to help us figure it all out. And Dr. Ganti, we were just talking about my personal example of this happening, but I'm sure others have felt this way too, having heartburn symptoms. Let's first talk about those symptoms of something less serious, and then we can identify when it's more serious.
Well, I think it's interesting because it's called heartburn, but it's not actually heart related. Heartburn comes from acid in the stomach kicking up to the esophagus. Our stomach has lining that prevents that burning from feeling like a burn, but once it goes into the esophagus where that lining is not there, it burns. And it's right here, right related to where the heart is. So it's close in proximity, even though it's not the same organ at all. And that's why it feels like your heart is on fire.
And sometimes the only way to describe that type of feeling is by saying I have chest pains.
Right.
And as soon as you say that to a medical professional, what are they going to do?
They're going to make you go to the emergency department.
And so what is one of the key differences that you can identify between heartburn and a heart attack that could save you a trip to the ER?
I mean, it's really impossible to say it's definitely not a heart attack, but we can talk in general. So, for example, if you are having some heartburn or pain that happens right after a meal, and maybe you had like a really heavy meal and you laid down, or maybe you bent down, that change in position can kick up the acid to the esophagus. So that might be one thing. We generally say if you have any kind of risk factors or anything that would make you more prone to having a heart attack, you should definitely go to the ER. So what are those things? Do you have an idea? Or?
Well, I was thinking hereditary problems.
For sure. History of heart disease, diabetes, age over the age 45 or older, I guess, which I know is not that old.
It's not, yeah. I mean, I was 26 when it happened to me, and it didn't matter. The doctor said, you could be having a heart attack. We need to get those tests done.
Yes. So I always say any of those risk factors, you need to dash over to the ER, and that will actually be our acronym for the segment. DASH, diabetes, age over 45, smoking, and either high blood pressure, hypothyroid, which is low thyroid, or high cholesterol.
All right, great things to remember. DASH, I like that. So when should you call 911 and really treat this like an emergency that needs extra assistance from your house?
Okay, so anytime you have chest pain accompanied by shortness of breath, nausea, the pain is worse with exertion, and I don't mean like it has to be huge physical labor, but you know, you're in your room and you can't take 4 steps to the door, for example, or you're on your couch and you can't even get up to get a glass of water because it hurts so bad. Usually heartburn tends to be a constant kind of pain, and it's just this, whereas with chest pain, you also feel bad everywhere else. You might feel lightheaded, you might feel dizzy, you feel sick, so it's usually more global.
Okay, and what are some of the tests that you can do once you get to the emergency department that can really identify whether this is a heart attack or not?
So what they'll do for the emergency department is they hook you up to a cardiac monitor, they'll do an electrocardiogram, and then they do a test called troponin. So that is a blood test that tells us if there has been any damage to heart muscle that has leaked into the bloodstream.
Okay, and is it pretty quick? They can find out?
It's pretty quick. They usually have to keep you for a number of hours because they'll do at least 2 tests. And a lot of times they'll bring you in at least for overnight observation so they can get to the bottom of it. Kind of depends on your risk factors.
Let's talk about how serious it would be if you were to ignore these symptoms and just choose to try and fight off a heart attack at home.
I mean, you could drop dead. So you could have these symptoms and it could just be a matter of minutes and then you're done. In the olden days, we used to call it a widowmaker, which is, you know, like you have a guy, 45, has heart pain, chest pain, and then just keels over. And I mean, I personally know people like that.
Just because it's not something that they can identify on their own.
Correct. Or they think, oh, you know, I'm a little overweight, I did have a heavy meal. What if you have both things, right? So it's always a little bit confusing.
Have you had patients come into the emergency department who have said, oh, it's not a heart attack, I have heartburn all the time, but somebody is telling me, a family member, that I just have to
They
get it
made me
checked
come,
out.
right.
Right, but then they end up really having a serious problem.
Absolutely. We see it every day. So patients are not always able to tell what is the difference. And it's kind of like if you have a chronic condition like heartburn, for example, how do you know that today is going to be when it's not just regular heartburn, right?
Yeah, very good point. All right, Dr. Ganti with us one more time. Thank you so much for
Thank
answering
you.
all those questions. I'll send it back to you ladies at the desk.
All right, Kirsten, thank you.